Kia ora koutou, nau mai, haere mai. A warm welcome to all of you, and thanks so much for joining us this morning for our online event for We Read Auckland. Ka pānui tātou I Tāmaki Makaurau. Ko Inika Vogels o tōku ingoa, ki te pātaka kōrero o Tāmaki Makaurau ahau e mahai ana. My name is Inika Vogels, and I work at Auckland Libraries, and I'm thrilled to be co-hosting today's event, where we'll be speaking with Chloe Gong, the author of These Violent Delights. I'd like to introduce you to our co-host for today, Aishi Mazu, who's joining us from Albany Village Library on the beautiful North Shore of Tāmaki Makaurau, Auckland. Kia ora, Ai.
Kia ora, ko ai toku inga. For our library members and everyone else who's joining us online today, We Read Auckland is our new winter program, celebrating Auckland readers and writers and the stories that bring us together.
Now, before we introduce our fabulous guest author, Chloe, we've just got a few housekeeping bits and pieces. And we've got heaps of questions to discuss with Chloe today, and we know that you'll have some too. So if you're watching on the Auckland Library's website and you'd like to join in the Q&A, you can use the chat box below, or if you're on Vimeo, you can use the Q&A box. And please feel free to post your questions anytime. I'll be keeping one eye on the thread. So if you see my eyes darting around a little bit, I'm just keeping an eye out for your comments. And we're going to include as many of your questions as we can in the time that we've got with Chloe today. So we'll be running for about an hour. And now, if you want to share where you're beaming in from, you can do that in the chat box, or if you want to post anonymously, that's fine too. Just tick the box in Vimeo to do that. Now, we have a live stream crew in the background working away, so they'll do their best to help with any sort of tech issues that you might have. So if you do have a tech issue, just go ahead and post that into the text box as well. And I'll let you know that we are recording this talk, and we will put it up onto our Auckland Libraries YouTube channel in the next little while with some captions added so that you can share it with anyone who misses out today. So on with the show.
We're so excited to introduce you to our guest author for today. Beaming in live from the States, the author of These Violent Delights, Chloe Gong. These Violent Delights is a heart-stopping debut novel, an imaginative Romeo and Juliet retelling set in 1920s Shanghai with rival gangs and monsters in the depth of the Huangpu River. Chloe was born in Shanghai, grew up in her hometown of Auckland, and is currently based in the States. These Violent Delights was released in November 2020. It became an instant New York Times bestseller and was awarded BuzzFeed's Best Young Adult Book of 2020. Chloe graduated from the University of Pennsylvania, where she was studying English and International Relations. Congratulations! Kia ora, Chloe!
Hello! I'm so excited to be here.
Kia ora, Chloe. We're so excited to have you, and thanks so much for taking the time to join us this evening for you. I think it's maybe 7 o'clock in the States where you are.
It is indeed. I can think of nothing better to be doing, so thank you for having me.
Oh, well, thanks again. Well, Chloe, we've just given a little introduction to These Violent Delights, but we wondered if you could tell our listeners, particularly those who might not have read it yet, just a little bit more about this book.
Yes, of course. So I have it here ready for show and tell. These Violent Delights is a Romeo and Juliet retelling set in 1920 Shanghai, and it follows the heirs of these two rival gangs in the city who have to work together when a monster rises from the river and starts killing all of their people. But, you know, as always in these sorts of books, not everything is what it seems, and they have to work together and figure out the truth before everyone in their city dies, which would be really bad. And it's the first in a duology, and the second, which I have the advanced reading copy ready, is the finale of the story. So that's what's coming this November.
That is so exciting. Now, Chloe, I really loved your book. We really loved it. And we know that heaps of the people who are tuning in today are just so keen to hear more about it and hear from you. So we wondered for a start, though, for all of those aspiring writers out there, can you tell us what it feels like to know that your story is being read and loved by people from all over the world?
It feels absolutely surreal. I truly can't really describe what it's like to have a story be living in your head for so long. And then it's like you're the only one who knows these characters, you're the only one who's crying over these characters, laughing with these characters. And suddenly it goes out onto the shelves, and now so many other people are living in this world that for so long only you had been like the occupant of. So it's truly, it's indescribable, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world, because I think that's the reason why I wanted to write anyway, to have other people like come into this little like world I've created and be like, oh, like this is like my favorite place to escape, and I'm like, me too. Oh, welcome.
Um, I want to say like thank you, Chloe, for writing this book. Because as a teen, there weren't that many fantasy books, like with characters like me. Like, I have like complete different culture at home and at school, like in different language. So it's like really cool to have like someone like Juliet. I could just relate to her when I was reading. I was like, oh my gosh, she doesn't know who she is either. And it's like, am I Japanese or am I Kiwi? So do you feel like this, and how did it like kind of like help you write this character?
Yeah, so when I wrote Juliet, I was very, very intentionally trying to echo like the second generation, like diaspora, like Asian experience, right? Because even though she's technically, maybe not diaspora because she's only sent out for 4 years and then she's back, I wanted her to be like an echo anyway. So I feel like there are so many like Asian diaspora kids, like whether it's in, New Zealand or the States, because Juliet goes to America, but I feel like it's very similar. Like it's Eastern like culture and home life implanted into the West, and like you feel like you're neither of the world. And I felt like that was something that could really echo, like regardless of who, like the specifics of my audience, but just the general like diaspora experience. And I was like, this is like a story thread I've never really seen in my books, but I don't want the book to only be about that, right? Because there were already these books like talking about what it means to like be a kid of two cultures, and like all of these really hard-hitting stories exploring it, which is also so important. But I also wanted it to just be like a fantasy story with like monsters and gangs and like enemy squads, right? So I was like, I want the YA fantasy that I love so much, and then I also just want this character who can like have these struggles that readers like me would just want to look at, something that's just a reflection, but the story isn't about that. So when I went into that, I was like, it's time for us Asians to shine.
I like it.
Awesome. Hey, Chloe, we have our first audience question coming through. So I'm just going to sprinkle the audience questions through the chat. I hope you don't mind. We've got Reva B's got a comment here. She says, hi, Chloe. She's such a big fan, big heart there. She wants to know how often when you abbreviate these Violent Delights to TVD, do people think that you're talking about the Vampire Diaries instead of your book?
Oh,
has that happened?
Quite often. I think that's a big thing. I like on Twitter, especially because everyone abbreviates on Twitter. Everyone thinks These Violent Delights is the Vampire Diaries. It is a thing. Especially there's also there's another book called These Violent Delights that came out very closely to it. So that's its own confusion as well. I guess it's just a boom in the TVD things in pop culture these days. So it much confusion on the internet.
Cool. Well, we also noticed that your book was released just in November 2020, and it hit the bestseller chart straight away in New York Times Young Adult Bestseller chart, which is just so phenomenal for a debut novel. We want to know why you think that These Violent Delights struck such a chord with your readers right out of the gate.
Ooh, good question. I think word of mouth was so important for when These Violent Delights first like came out, because I remember that like the week of release there were a lot of like really passionate readers making like fan edits and like videos and like drawing fan art, and in that 1 week it was coming out, there was like a huge boom of like people talking about it. And it was just because I feel like books live and die by like how much people are talking about it, right? Because if you read a book and you're like, oh well, that was kind of okay, and then you don't talk about it, that's one person who read it. You read a book and you really love it and tell your friends, like that's like what 11 books off the shelves when they go out and buy it as well. So during the first week there was just so many passionate readers who came out and were just raving about loving it, which was so amazing. Like I could not believe it. And like, you know, in the lead up to the release as well, I was on TikTok a lot talking about like the tropes and like the characters and all of that. And there were a lot of people in the comments like getting ready. They were like, okay, I'm gonna buy it when it comes out. So I think the first week, especially, all the people who were getting ready for it and all the people who started like talking about it as it was on shelves, when it combined, like it just, you know, number 3 on the list was like huge because it's high too. It's not just number 10. I was like, wow, okay. So yeah.
It's so great. We'll check it over to you, I.
I just want to say that you did a really amazing job with the details. Like, I could like picture in my mind like the river and the streets, and and there was like a lot of like, there was so much going on in the book. Like there was like the tension with the rival gangs and the political situation with like the different groups of foreigners. The French, the Russians, the British, all trying to gain control over Shanghai, but then you had the nationalists and like communists, but there's like a whole lot of things. So like, how did you do your research? Like how? And like, yeah. Sorry, that was
a lot of
Yeah.
like textbook reading, and then a lot of Googling, and then a lot of like just trying to make sense of everything. Because when I went into it, I knew that like I wanted to tell a story in 1920 Shanghai first because I was really familiar with the culture. It was all these stories that my parents were telling me about. And the aesthetic of it is just gorgeous, right? Like you always want to write a book in like a beautiful world. But then I also knew like if I'm going to go into the setting of 1920 Shanghai, there was so many like politics and like, social injustice at the time that it would just be completely empty if I used that setting and didn't include any of the real life like historical elements. So I went into it, really dead set on having these elements. So even before I started writing it, I was doing the research. So and even in getting the concept of like the rival gangs and like having their colors be like red and white, I knew, well, China was about to hit civil war in 1927.
Yeah.
If I set this book in 1926, I can make these like interesting parallels with like the Scarlet Gang and the White Flowers, because like nationalists, communists, like the split along the color lines, all of that stuff, right? And then as the plot was moving on, like I was like, well, if there's a monster rising in the city, where is the monster stemming from? Is the monster actually anti-colonialism commentary? And if so, what was going on like in terms of like colonialism and imperialism at the time? So a lot of the like basic plot structure was coming together from like preliminary research, and then I kind of decided like the direction I was going to go in, and then I started looking at like more like smaller detail research, like what was the street called, and what was this park called, and when was this building built, and all of those little nitty-gritty things, and just smushed it together.
Wow, that's like a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that helps to answer one of our audience questions here. Merida said that she absolutely loved the book, and she wanted to know how you came up with the plot. So I think you've helped to answer that for us. Ali, do you mind if I pop in another audience question? They're coming in thick and
Go ahead.
fast.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we have Emily and Vanessa are both interested to know. First, they want to know which character was the most fun to write, and also who's your favorite character. So those two might be the same or they might be different.
Yeah.
I always have such a hard question on I have such a hard time answering this question, because my immediate instinct is always to go with Juliet, because she's the main character, and she's kind of the main character for a reason, because I found her the most interesting to like explore and to like see the world from. And she's also just kind of like off the rails, right? So she's so fun to write because she'll just say anything. She'll beat anyone up. She will do it. She's not afraid. So it's like so fun to write a whole narrative from her eyes, because she's not really limited by anything. And like a lot of the book is about like exploring what are the limits of her power, because she, as the heir of like a gang controlling most of the city's black market, she feels powerful. And then there are these moments where she's suddenly losing her power, and she's like, well, what is happening? So those moments are so fun too, because I make her do anything, and then she has to face the consequences of her actions, which she hates. So she's the most fun, like in that sense. But I also really, really love writing Elisa, who's Roma's little sister, because she's like the youngest who gets like a point of view like throughout the book. And because she's young, in a sense, she's kind of like the flip part of why Juliet is so fun, because Juliet's so fun to write because she's just a loose cannon. And Elisa is so fun to write because she just says anything, because she's so young. She doesn't really know what she's seeing, and she just makes these like absurd observations that I just have a lot of fun playing with when I'm writing her.
That actually was like part of my next question. Can I kind of butt in here? Because I was going to say, like, Juliet is such a badass, like, especially with that necklace, with like the garrote necklace, and how she has like the knives and everything just hidden. Like, I was like, what the heck? I kind of wish I was that cool, like, wearing a garrote necklace. But did you mentioned that she was like, all over the place, right? But did you start off like this? Like, were you like, I want to write a character like this, or did she like turn like badass, like as you like going through the process? You're like, okay, let's just add a spice of that, a little bit of crazy, and did it? How was it?
She did start like that, because when I set out to write her, she was always going to be that archetype. So it was very much informed by the YA that I was reading, like as I was really getting into it, right? Like what was really big in the 2010s, like Throne of Glass, like Selena and Divergent, like Tris Prior, like these YA archetypes, like the ones who were really just kind of sassy, kind of violent. I really loved them, and I kind of just sat down. I was like, I want to write someone like that. And then on the flips, what am I trying to say? On the double edge of that, so many YA protagonists, so many YA characters who were Asian, as I was growing up in YA, were just silent. They didn't say anything. They were just like, they were either like the tiger stereotype or they were the silent stereotype. And I was like, this is, because of, poor representation. So when I'm going into it, not only are we like subverting that, but we're combining it with the white archetype that I've always loved so much, but we're only afforded to, the white protagonist. So Juliet now gets her turn in it, and she's just living the archetype, but it's so different to what we've already seen, because she has the cultural like aspect to it.
Awesome. We have another couple of author questions coming in. So we have Jennifer's asked, where does the title come from? I think I know, but I'd really love you to explain it.
Yes, the title comes from the Romeo and Juliet line. These violent delights have violent ends, which Friar Lawrence says in, I can't remember the exact act, but Friar Lawrence says it in the original play. And that's where we've yanked these violent delights and the not the hour part, the violent ends part.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Chloe. And Reva B has asked, what is your favorite scene with Roma and Juliet? Sorry, not Romeo, Roma and Juliet. She says she can't choose, so she wants to hear yours.
Oh, that's a good question. I guess maybe the Mantua scene, because it's like the culmination of, their whole character arc throughout the book. It's like, I feel like books are like the build up and then the explosion and then the payoff, right? So for Roma and Juliet's character arcs separately and then in tandem, I feel like Mantua is when like, misunderstandings and all of that start to like absolutely explode and collide against each other. And you finally get to see it play out. And then from that point onward, it's like payoff. So I like that scene for the pivotal of it all.
Nice. And Jay wants to know, are any of the characters based off anyone you know personally? I don't know if you would tell us or not.
Absolutely not. I can never do that, because I've written like 8 or 9 manuscripts before these violent delights, and for 3 of them, which was like a series like collected together, I wrote my friends in, and then in like book 2 I realized I needed to kill them. And then they got so mad because they were like, why would you write me in just to kill you, just to kill us? And I was like, well, I can't help it. That's natural. I need it for the character story. And they were so mad. So after that, I learned my lesson. Never basing anyone on anyone ever again.
Well, I have a little question here, a little bit about the way that you you plot your book, because there's a lot going on in these Violent Delights. It's for those who haven't read it, it's really complex landscape, like we've discussed before. Lots of different factions, lots of huge cast of characters, and lots of intrigue as well. So trying to decide when you're going to let the cat out of the bag on various bits, it must be really fun, but also quite complicated. So we wanted to know if you could share your process about how you plan out and plot your book, like whether you're a sort of a post-its on the wall girl or a writing software, or what works for you.
I outline very thoroughly. So before I start drafting anything, I write up like in a big Word document, just everything that I know is going to happen, that I think is going to happen. Sometimes it goes a bit, off track, but it's like the events, like a little, it's essentially like a screenplay. Like I just write out everything that they do, they're thinking, they're saying, and what I'm trying to evoke in the reader. And sometimes if there's like a plot twist coming or like an event that we don't know about yet, like in my outline, I'll say, here you can kind of start feeling the hints of this, but the reader doesn't know. Or like, here you need to start making the reader feel so and so. So my like preparation process before I even start writing the novel is like a very long like list of instructions to myself. But even after I do that, usually the first draft will be, there will be plot holes, there'll be certain plot threads that I've just completely forgotten about. And so it's mostly in revision that like it starts feeling like a real book, because for some reason I really love writing complicated books. Like I can never write anything that just has one plot line. I always have one plot line and like 5 subplots. So usually like by the time I've written the book for the first time, half of the subplots are completely loose. Like you forget about one goes off in a completely different tangent. So like because of that, like editing is just so important like in my process, because it's only in going back to it and like writing and rewriting things actually start making sense. So half of writing is rewriting is a really good, motto, honestly.
Awesome. That's so interesting. Yeah, that you write it like a screenplay. Yeah, I think it reads that way. It does in a good way. I'll throw over to you, I
just want to say like about the secondary characters. There was like really great representation, including queers, and they all had like lives and backstories of their own, and they weren't just in the background. You got to really know them, and you wanted to get to know them. Do you see a potential for like a spin-off? Like my favorite character was Kathleen, and I would love to read like a graphic novel, like
Oh, that would be an idea. I don't know who actually is in charge. I think graphic novel adaptations are like sub-rights as well. So if any graphic novel companies are watching this and want to adapt my book, call my agent. But it's actually really funny that you asked this question, because there is a spin-off coming. It's already been announced. There's a duology spin-off releasing fall of 2022 and fall of 2023, following one of the following one of the like main cast, a character that you've met in These Violent Delights Now Violent Ends, which we haven't revealed yet because that would give away like how our violent ends turns out. But Fair Lady Fortune releasing 2022. Keep a lookout for it. It is coming.
writing that down.
Yeah.
Awesome. We can't wait to find out who it is. Do you say Foul Lady Fortune?
I'm very excited to reveal it.
Yeah, nice.
Foul Lady Fortune.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Now, didn't you have a question about bugs?
Yeah, so that was like, why bugs? It's been bugging me, pun intended. But wasn't like a contagious sickness like enough? Like, did you really have to have like the creepy crawlies? Like when I was reading, I'm like, ugh, like like the whole body shivers. Like, why?
That has been like the top reaction. Like just everyone reading has just been like, why insects? And honestly, like I can't say. Like so many of my plot elements, there could be like a reason to it, right? Like the monster is a monster because it's anti-colonialism commentary. Like red is, symbolic of the communists, white is symbolic of the blah, 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 right? But the insects, I just wanted to creep people out, to be quite honest. I'm also pretty sure that plot thread came. I'm pretty sure it was. I had a dream that there were contagious lice coming out from a pear, and that was kind of one of the. It was way before I wrote these Mountain Lights, and it was in. I left it in my notes app, and then as I was kind of like developing the story, I was like, okay, because I'm a very visual writer as well, right? So as I'm like trying to imagine like how the world is like coming out, like, you know, I saw the streets, I saw the like alleyways, and I was just imagining like, how can I creep this out the most? How do I visualize like something that you just can't conquer, something that's like beyond human control? And just droves of insects came to mind. So
Yeah, mission accomplished. You like creeped me out. And
good.
but you also actually did something like, so you creeped me out and gave me shivers, right? But you also did something else. You made me cry, because I have this like weird thing where when I read like love stories or something and there's like a sad scene, like my right arm starts to hurt, and I have to kind of like put my book, like, you know, it's weird. I don't know, like it might be something mental or whatever. But like the last scene with like Romeo and Juliet, like made like my arm hurt. So you did a lot, like creepiness and sore arm with like tears. So thank you.
If your doctor calls me up one day and they're like, why is my patient's arm about to fall off because of you? I apologize in advance.
Yeah.
Completely. Signs of a heart attack. I just watch out there.
Yeah.
Now, for those of you who haven't read the book, what I might be referring to is there is actually a massive last-minute decision from Juliet at the very end of the book, and it puts such a twist into the tale. Everything's left hanging right in the middle. You're just left literally hanging off the cliff, and there's a big to be continued. And as Chloe's noted, this is part one of a two-part story, and the sequel, Our Violent Delights, comes out in November. Yep. So we were wondering if you knew right from the start that you were going to end These Violent Delights right at that point. Like, did you write the manuscript as two separate novels, or did you write one huge book about Romeo and Juliet and their world and then find a good place to split it?
Mm-hmm. Good question. It used to be one huge book, but when it was one huge book, it actually had a completely different ending. So it's actually very funny because I had the one huge book, and it wasn't actually that big. It was like 117,000 words, I think, which is like it was about the size of like These Mountain Lights, like as it's on its own right now. And that was the book that my agent signed, and that was the book that we sent out to editors for them to acquire. So it's actually really funny because now there are just a bunch of editors like scattered across New York City who read the original manuscript and knew the original ending. And if they ever end up reading Our Violent Ends, they're gonna be like, what happened to the original story? Anyway, but once Simon & Schuster acquired it, I was working with my editor and talking about like, you know, the changes we wanted to make and like how we could really flesh out some more of the characters, because when she signed the original manuscript, a lot of the storylines were actually much shorter. So the secondary characters didn't have as much screen time, and we really thought it would help the story along if they had more development. So like the solution to that problem was actually, what if it was just a duology? What if we gave it 2 books of time to really flesh out? So what happened was, to actually get these 2 books, we took the original manuscript and kind of cut it at like the 80%, 20% mark. The 80% kind of got rearranged a lot. A new ending was written. The original 20% that got cut out, we took the 5% climax, put it into book 2, and then everything else of book 2 was new like development for the storyline. So that's the like dissection Frankenstein experiment of how we got here.
That's so interesting. Oh, thank you for sharing that with us. That's really, really fascinating. I've got a couple more questions for the audience, so I'm going to take the reins again. Let me have a look here. So we have Vi or V. She says, "Hi, Chloe. Which character do you relate to the most?"
Ooh, good question. I think I relate a lot to Juliet's like cultural struggles, right? Because so much of that was pulled from me. But like in terms of her broader personality, she's kind of like who you want to be rather than like a representation of like who I really am. Like I'm not. I like knives. I like lighters, but I probably don't commit arson in my free time. So she's like, you know, she's a lot of her is me, but she's probably not who I like completely relate to the most in terms of like her general, personality. I think Benedict gets a lot of my like anxiety. So I relate to him a lot because he kind of goes through the world in the way that I go through the world. So yeah.
So a split. He sort of dropped a little bit into
Yeah.
a few different characters.
Yeah. I took
nice.
took parts of me and just plonked them into everyone. Yeah.
I think all of us could do with a little bit of Juliet in us, you know, to make our way in the world. Maybe not so many of the knives, but
Exactly.
I'll just pop in one more question from the audience now. Oh, here we go. This is pretty cool. Courtney McKay says she's nearly finished and she absolutely loves it, but she wants to know what books you would recommend for people who can't wait until November for more Roma and Juliet.
Oh, that's a good question. If you haven't read The Diviners by Libba Bray, that's a YA historical fantasy set in 1920s New York, which has a lot of the vibes that I was also trying to capture in these Violent Delights. It's one of my favorite series, so you could probably feel the inspiration I got from it. I also love Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. It is one of the best star-crossed lovers in YA. Just chef's kiss. And I think, are there any new releases that kind of remind me of them? That's all I can think of now.
Yeah,
But
that's
those
great.
series will
We've
keep
got
you
another
entertained
question
for a long
later. We
time.
can look into that. Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. And if you are Auckland Libraries member, of course, you can find those in your Auckland Libraries catalogue. Just pop that in there. I'll throw it over to you, Ai.
Apart from the obvious Romeo and Juliet, were there any other books or authors that inspired these Violent Delights?
Yeah, so the previous two series that I just mentioned were huge inspirations. So like The Diviners, Daughter of Smoke and Bone, I grew up on those series. So like when I set out to write like, a big story of my own, like that was kind of what I was trying to like, those vibes were what I was trying to go for. I guess it was The Mortal Instruments by Cassandra Clare that got me into reading so much. It got me into like fandom, and it got me into, I guess, like the mindset I was trying to capture when I wrote these films, right? Because I wasn't just trying to tell like a good story or like, create a good world. I mean, obviously that was like a very primary goal, but I also knew like ultimately to create a good story, I want the readers to be obsessed, because that's what I'm going for. Like if I'm gonna be a published author and not just have a story like sitting in my drawers that no one can read. If I'm gonna be a published author, I want people to read it and I want people to be obsessed with it, because that's how I reacted to my favorite books, right? So I was like, if people aren't like simping over Roma on Twitter, if people don't want Juliet to step on them, then I failed. So that was the lessons I learned from Shadowhunters Chronicles, because that was what I was doing on the internet when I was 15.
That actually leads quite nicely into one of my later questions, so I might jump there if that's okay, Ai. Yeah, we've been talking a lot about the way you promote your work online. It is absolutely amazing. I mean, I'm a bit of an old, so for me, it just blows my mind. For those of you who haven't yet followed Chloe on all her various social media feeds, please go and jump on there after this talk. Chloe uses TikTok or BookTok. She's on Insta. She's got a Tumblr account. She is really generous about sharing all the fan art, because people are so obsessed with this book that they're creating this most incredible creative responses to it. There's images, there's recovered books, there's memes of various scenes that people have connected with. It's just so awesome. And it's, for me, it's so different from that traditional book industry model of marketing, which is more or less one way, apart from your odd signings and things like that. So we just love the fact that it's a true exchange of minds. We wanted to know if you could tell us a bit about any fandoms that you've been a part of over the years and what those have meant to you.
I love how this is just me exposing myself. So yeah,
Well, sorry
because
about that. We really want to know.
no. It's I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to do it. You can take the fandom, you can take me out of fandom, but you can't take fandom out of me, is what I always say. It's like because I like really grew up on these books and I kind of, I guess, came of age during the YA boom. It's really hard for me to even think of myself as like removed from it, right? Because a lot of other YA authors are like older when they go into it. They didn't grow up on it. They've kind of just entered this industry, learned about their audience, and they produce works. And like other older series, you know, they're their colleagues. They're just, you know, fellow YA authors now. But I was a part of like, you know, as I mentioned, the Mortal Instruments fandom. I was a part of like Divergent, the fandom, Percy Jackson. I'm sure there were a bunch of others. The Darkest Powers by Kelly Armstrong. Like my Tumblr URL for a long portion of time was just like a mashup of like every character that I loved. And I would log on every day and reblog gift sets of them and like just all of that, right? So it's my mindset is very much like I'm still like a big fan of, you know, YA. I'm still a reader and I still pick up like new obsessions like as I enter new series. And I think it's because I haven't entirely like aged out of the, you know, target audience yet because I'm only 22. I'm still very close to who they're targeting. So I don't know if it's going to change like, you know, as I get older, if I'm going to think of myself more as an author than a reader. But you know, as it is now, I still think of myself as, you know, another like Stan account on Twitter. And then I reply to people and they're like, you replied to me? And I'm just sitting here like, I am you. So like
Love it. Absolutely love that. Yeah, my sort of follow-up question was pretty much like, what is it like to be the inspiration for a fandom and also to take part in it? Because for me, I think you know, I love the fact that you're so excited about your own characters and your own world that you've created.
Yeah, it's no, I could never have imagined even like having started, like having created a product that, you know, led to a fandom just like the types that I was a part of once, right? Like I feel like that's like every, I guess, reader's dream to actually be on the other side and see what it's like. And like, I never want to take that for granted because, you know, people produce so many cool like edits and so many just there are so many cool thoughts coming out of like people who are like passionate about these books and it's just it's wild because I was doing that like a few years ago and just the fact that it stems so much creativity is like wow, like that's all you can really hope to do like if you put something out into the world.
Awesome. I am going to throw it to you.
Okay. Yeah, because you know how you're talking about the YA, and I'm thinking the book was like a mashup of like the best possible way. It's like there was like elements of like historical fantasy, and then there's historical fiction, fantasy, mystery, romance, and like even horror. And it's intended for like the YA audience. So there's like a lot of high emotions and like, you know, drama, which I love. We all love, right? Have you noticed that there's like more of a direction that the YA fiction is going in rather than just, you know, one single genre?
Yeah, I think YA has the flexibility to give you like so many like subgenres within it, right? Because I think, I guess in a way, the limits of adult fiction is that it has to be shelved somewhere in bookstores, right? If you're reading adult fiction, you're walking to the romance shelf or you're walking to the fantasy shelf. It's the same in like libraries, right? I remember I was always in the YA stacks because I could just look for anything. And it was much harder for me to actually go look at the adult shelves without knowing specifically what I was going to look for because I had to be like, okay, I'm going to go look for a mystery novel or I'm going to go look for a sci-fi novel and it would be all separated. Whereas in YA, like it's just YA. It's like it's not a genre, but it's like a pseudo category of sorts because everything is just clumped together. And I think that gives like authors the flexibility to be like, well, I don't want it to just be, you know, a historical story. I'm going to put a monster in it. I'm going to put a mystery in it. I'm going to put like a heavy romantic plotline in it. And that's okay. Like that's allowed. That's even encouraged. So long as you have like the other YA elements of like, you know, fast paced, good character work and, you know, steady world building and all of that.
Awesome. I'm going to jump in with a few audience questions. V or Vi has asked, what's your favorite quote from the book? Do you have one?
Oh, I don't know if I do have one because it's when I was writing these Violent Delights, I think specifically, I didn't realize that there would be certain quotes that jumped out so much to other people, if that makes sense. Because as I'm writing things, you know, it's just, you know, the words that are coming out for that specific scene, for that specific purpose. And then after the book came out, I started realizing that there were certain lines that just read nicely on their own and that people were latching onto. So to me, I think I can't choose a favorite line because I didn't realize that there would be these lines, right? As I was writing Our Violent Ends, I was trying to guess which lines could really become those like quotation lines, and I just can't. It's so difficult for me to, because I don't know which ones are gonna like people are gonna slap on Pinterest, and I don't know which ones are just gonna get lost in the rest of the words, right? So I'm gonna have to see which ones the readers really love, and I'll adopt those.
Nice. Hey, we've got an interesting one here, and it definitely reflects some big interests in social media right now with young people. Sushmita asks, what are the zodiac signs of a couple of these Violent Delights characters?
Oh,
is that something
I
you've
did
thought
have a
about?
list. It is. I do have a list of them. I will pull it up right now because I always forget because I'm actually not very good at knowing what each zodiac sign means. But my roommate is very, very good at it. Tashi Buyan, who wrote Counting Down with You. Here it is. So Juliet is a Libra, Roma is a Cancer, Benedict is a Taurus, Marshall is a Leo, and Rosalind and Kathleen are Virgos, I believe. September 22nd. I didn't even write it down, but I think they're Virgos. Yeah.
Wow. Cool.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, it makes sense now. I was like, yeah, I love Virgos. And I'm like, Cancer, that's why. So
Yeah.
I love my astrology.
I haven't thought of their like rising signs or their moon signs. I feel like there's a lot more to be done in that arena too, but those are their sun signs. Yeah.
Awesome. We're going to jump into a few questions about your writing. So this is really a little bit about inspiration for young writers. So what tips could you share for young writers who want to get that publishing deal? Like, how did you do it? And would you have done anything differently, having gone through the process once or twice now?
I think I wouldn't do it differently. And I would actually recommend the way that I did it. Because how I kind of went about it was I took writing very not seriously in the beginning, which I think is so healthy. Because I started when I was 13, and from like 13 to maybe even like 17-ish, I was kind of just writing to entertain myself and to tell stories and to really just, you know, use time because I didn't have much else to do except go to Auckland libraries and read books. Like that was literally the extent of my social life. So when I wasn't reading, I was just writing, right? So I was, you know, thinking up these like random stories that, just, to be quite honest, looking back, they weren't very good, but I was writing. And as I was writing and not taking myself seriously, my craft was growing like in the process. And by the time I actually got a good idea, by the time it was something that I wanted to get published, my craft had gotten to a point where I was like, you know, I could tell the story in the way that I was imagining it in my head. Because so often people will get bogged down because the image in their head and their skill level hasn't quite, you know, matched up yet. And they need a lot of practice and they need to keep going and to keep revising and keep going until the book is, you know, the book that they want it to be. And so often people will give up at that point, which is really sad because you have to keep going and no book is, I want to say no book is good the first time around. Like it's very, very hard to write a perfect first product whether that means like you have to write a bunch of other books that you ditch first, or whether for your first book you write a bunch of drafts that you ditch first. It's so hard to get something perfect. I want to say it's impossible to get something good on the first go. It's just not going to happen. That's just not how writing works, I think. So like for young writers, I think don't feel pressured to create well, and don't feel pressured to create like something publishable in the very beginning, right? Don't take it seriously, let your craft grow, and then eventually, like, as you know, writing's like a muscle. As it keeps going, you're gonna feel how to create that story you're actually like envisioning. So like for me, I did it for so long, like not seriously. And then once I actually took it seriously and I thought, this is a book I will try to get published, you know, I found an agent in a month because I had really studied like how to write the query. And then the manuscript itself was like, it was in the shape that it needed to be to get published, because I'd done, you know, manuscript writing so many times that I sat down and I said, okay, this is gonna be the thing I'm gonna try to step into the industry with. And then I was.
Wow. That's very inspiring. Thank you for that. I'm sure lots of people need to hear that message as well, that your first writing does not have to be your best writing. And as you say, practice makes perfect. Yeah. And your editors will help too.
Exactly.
Cool. Yeah. Well, we're going to have a little chat to you about Auckland life, aren't we, I?
Yeah. So it's been a while since you've been home in New Zealand. What do you miss most when you're away from New Zealand? Like mince and cheese pies, maybe?
Oh yes, absolutely. Oh my god, I haven't had a mince and cheese pie in so long. You should be so hungry. The mince and cheese pies, good fish and chips off the beaches. Yeah, but I miss like good climate. New Zealand has such good weather, which is like a really boring answer, but like it never gets too hot, it never gets too cold. The rain smells really nice when it comes down. The skies are always really blue. I really learned not to take that like for granted when I'm here, because the rain smells bad. The skies are gray and they make me sad.
Oh,
Sending it out to
Yeah.
you, Chloe.
yeah.
If it helps,
Aw.
it's super grey here today. It looks really awful
Yeah.
outside.
Aw.
Yeah.
But New Zealand gray skies are like very comforting. There's something about it. Yeah.
Is it all the cloud
Is it like the
cover? Maybe
lack
that's
of
the
like
cover.
pollution? Like, you know,
I
there's
think
not that much
so.
pollution?
I honestly do think so.
Yeah, because
it
like
just feels nicer.
yeah. I think I know what you mean, yeah.
We wondered as well if you had like a favorite piece of writing about Auckland. You can see our Auckland theme here. Obviously, this is We Read Auckland, so we're going to have a little chat about Auckland stuff. Whether you had a favorite Auckland-based author or a piece of writing about Auckland that you wanted to share with us.
Oh, I do have to. I don't keep track of like, you know, the New Zealand writing that I'm reading. So it's really hard for me to like think back and like try figure out if it is Auckland specifically.
Oh,
But I think
go ahead with Aotearoa. That's fine too.
Mm.
oh, just New Zealand in general. Yeah. I think Karen Healy's Guardian of the Dead is like one of my favorite New Zealand sit books. I loved it so much. It was like the plot was just like it just kept going. Like the characters were amazing. I read it like quite a while back now, but it's like one of my favorite like New Zealand sit books. And there aren't a lot of New Zealand sit books because you know we're so small. There aren't a lot of us.
Yeah.
So it was when I read that, just you know, I picked it off the shelves randomly one day. It was just excellent. One of my faves.
Cool.
And speaking of like you know, New Zealand set books, have you ever used Auckland as a setting in your writing? And if not, does the absence make the heart grow fonder? I know that Auckland is just one of your homes now, but are you tempted to write something that's set over here? Like maybe like a Auckland Libraries mystery? Like I like cozy mysteries. You can kill me if you want.
That'd be kind of fun. Listen, let me jot that into my notes. That'll be like a future project. I'll remember to use your name and kill you off. But no, yeah.
Awesome.
I I have written a manuscript set in like rural Auckland. I wrote it after These Mountain Lights, actually. It was one of my first projects that I was like attempting, like, because people say that book 2, after you've hit the publishing industry, is the hardest one, because, like, there's so much more pressure. Like, you're thinking about like reader expectations, you're thinking about like agent expectations. So I was like, I'm gonna get that out of the way. Like, before I wrote Our Violent Ends, I wrote like just a very like whimsical manuscript set in like rural New Zealand, like about like a campsite kind of, but I have to like really put it at the very end of my publishing schedule, because like the way that the publishing industry kind of works is that you can only put out one book per year, and for a while you kind of want to establish your brand first. And because I already had a duology lined up, and then I have a spin-off duology lined up, that's 4 books, that's 4 years. And then after I leave historical fantasy, I kind of want to go into sci-fi, so that might be more books. So by the time I actually get this manuscript that I've actually already finished set in New Zealand out, I might be literally 30. So it's coming sometime in the future. It will come. It might take a while.
We'll look out for that. We'll look out for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you're in your dotage in your 30s.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to have a chat about reading now. We wanted to know if you have a favorite book or favorite series that you could share with us. Maybe you already covered that a little bit with the Liber Bray.
That's such a hard question. Yeah. Well, those are definitely among like my top favorites. It's so hard for me to pick just one, because like there are so many books that I've had like different like types of impact on me, I guess. Like The Raven Boys by Maggie Staveda is also one of my like top huge favorites. It like shaped my entire personality for a year. Well, actually a lot of books shape. For some reason I change aesthetics every year a lot. So like, especially during like university, like for 1 year I was wearing overalls a lot because I was like, I made my entire personality the Raven Boy series. And then the second year I dyed my hair blue because I made my entire personality Karoo from Daughter of Smoke and Bone. The third year I actually think I was trying to like channel Juliet more. So I was wearing a lot of like, sparkly things. So I don't have a real personality. My personality is just fragments of my favorite characters. So yeah, like the Raven Boys, Daughter of Smoke and Bone, all of those, huge favorites.
Awesome.
What are you reading
go,
right now? Like, oh, sorry. Yeah. What are you reading right now?
Right now, I have it right beside me. So I just finished this 6 Crimson Cranes. That's a tongue twister. 6 Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim. This is the advanced reader copy, so you can't really see. This is the UK cover, which I think New Zealand is gonna get because it's coming out from Potter, which is also my UK publisher. Very excellent, made me cry. And I'm also in the middle of reading Down Comes the Night by Alison Saar. I'm not very far in right now, but I think it is also enemies to lovers. So I think people who like These Mountain Lights might like this one too. So that's my
Great.
current
Actually, that ties in quite nicely to an audience question. Yeah. Jennifer asks, what's your favorite trope? And is it enemies to lovers?
I think it is, because I think there's so much angst in it, and I love angst. I feel like movement in a couple, like if a book is going from like a 2 characters who haven't gotten together to 2 characters who have gotten together, I feel like if they start with like hate, if not hatred, then at least intense dislike or irritation, it makes it so much more fun when they move into like actually liking each other, right? So because I love like angst and development and really pushing characters like to their very limit, I feel like Enemies to Lovers is such a good like vehicle for it.
That makes me wonder whether you're going to do a Taming of the Shrew retelling.
Can't say anything.
I shouldn't have said that. That's one of my favorite enemies to lovers. When we're talking Shakespeare, I absolutely love that. And of course, 10 Things About You is one of those as well.
Excellent movie.
Yeah, it really is. Hey, we've only got 5 minutes left to go. So I'm going to put in our This is going to be our last audience question. So to everyone who asked a question, thank you so much. I think I've covered pretty much all of them. But Mallory wants to know, was there a scene that you had to cut out that you're really gutted about?
Oh, I don't think I'm very gutted about it because if I have to cut out a scene, I realize like why I have to cut it out, right? Because usually it wasn't working with the storyline or there was a better way to deliver it. If I get really upset about needing to cut a scene, then I know that it actually has to stay and I have to like rework it in some way.
Right.
So there are a lot of like, smaller scenes where like I was like, well, I really enjoyed like writing this, but I can see why it doesn't fit. So there were like small scenes where like Romo was wearing a fake mustache and like Juliet just ripped it off and he was like, oh my god, that was really fun. I would have loved it if that could stay, but I was like, this isn't serving any purpose. It has to go. So maybe I'll release that as a deleted scene one day.
Cool. Well, our very last question is actually about reading and writing going together, really. So, I mean, obviously we're all very busy and sometimes reading can go on the back burner, but we want to know how you find the time to fit more reading into your busy life because, you've been a student, you're a published author, you've got lots going on. And what do you get out of that time when you do make the time to read? What do you get out of it?
I have a superpower because I'm a very, very fast reader. So sometimes people will get upset at me being like, oh yeah, I can read a book in a day. And they're like, how? So I usually, the thing that really, really helps me like keep on track, like with my, reading stack, even if there's a lot going on, is like setting out specific time, like in the day that I will just be sitting and only reading. And usually that's like right before I go to bed. So, if my bedtime is 1 a.m. from like 11 p.m. to 1 a.m., I'm like, okay, this is my reading time now. Nothing else is going to interrupt me. I'm just, tending to this book. And I think it's really important to have that, like, especially as a writer, because, I learned writing by reading. Like, I didn't take any professional classes. I haven't taken any professional classes, even after being an English major. All my English classes have been like studying literature rather than writing classes because I think so much of learning craft and learning what makes a good story comes from reading what other people are doing. So, I absolutely would not be the writer that I am if I hadn't read so much growing up, I think.
I think that's actually a beautiful place to start to wrap up our session here today. So you heard it here first, everybody. Chloe says, read more.
Yes.
We know that you got a lot of inspiration from Auckland Libraries, and I think Auckland Libraries is now super inspired by you, Chloe.
Oh. Yeah, this truly could not have happened without Auckland Libraries. Like, I'm not just saying that because this is an Auckland Libraries event. I truly would not be here without Glenfield Library, East Coast Bays Libraries. Like, that's where I spent all of my like waking hours. So, truly, the start of it all.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, when you finally do get to come back home, Chloe, East Coast Bays is having a reno, so you can come and a renovation, so you can come and see the new space.
Oh, I'm excited.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. I'm going to hand it to you to wrap us up.
Okay, so we're going to have to wrap it up, and because we're running out of time. But before we go, we just want to say, Ngā mihi nui, thanks so much, Chloe, for joining us today, and for all your wonderful insight into these violent delights and your writing and your reading life. We've learnt so much, and we can't wait to read more from you. And please let us know when you're in Auckland so we can go for a coffee. I'd love to.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, no, thank you, Chloe. Well, a reminder to all of our Auckland Libraries members who are online today that you can request these Violent Delights from our online catalogue, and you can get it sent straight to the library of your choice when it's your turn to read it. And of course, that goes as well for all of our people out there who are beaming in from across the world. Your local libraries will hopefully have copies, and if they don't, make sure they get it. You can get into a waitlist already for Auckland Libraries for Chloe's next book, Our Violent Delights, which is coming out November 2021. And of course, if you want your own copy, you should go down to your local bookstore or get it online. You won't regret having this on your shelf. A huge thanks to everybody who's tuned in for our live stream today, and especially to all of those who asked a question. We're so grateful that you joined in question, and I hope that you're happy with the question and the answers that you got. Hope you enjoyed yourselves this morning. We'll be sending out an email invitation so that you can let us know what you thought of our event today. So do look out for that in your inbox. Thanks again for supporting Auckland Libraries and our We Read Auckland event. And thanks again to Chloe. You can check out our Auckland Libraries website and your local library to find out what's coming up in our last week of We Read Auckland festival. Take care, everybody, and we'll say ka kite ano to Chloe Gong. Catch you, Chloe. See you again on the flip side.
Bye.
We hope to see you all
Bye.
again soon, and enjoy the rest of your day.